Testing, testing. Welcome back, listeners of the internet, to my channel where Alia, that is I, will be reading to you some short sci fi stories. Today, I have Rationalized by Larry Hodges. This story I found in a series called Gothic Fantasy, the specific book being compelling science fiction short stories. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this story. Rationalized by Larry Hodges. It had been a long Saturday morning, but the training was over. Now Dr. Bruce watched Jeremy and his friend Laura as they played games and drank lemonade. Both actions were illegal. He took a sip of the chemically created lemonade he made himself. It was a break from the dreary diet of NutriCubes and water, only approved food or drink allowed or needed. He wondered if actual lemon trees ever existed. Jeremy came over. "Dad, where's the puppy?" he whispered. "They borrowed it from the puppy farm." "I kept it a secret like you asked, but when are we going to tell what it's for?" "Soon," Bruce said. He could already see in his son the hardening facial features of a rationalized adult. When one fakes it enough, it becomes part of you. Jeremy had turned 13 on June 25th, 2105, 1 month ago. As required by law, doctors had been scheduled to cut into his brain, the amygdala, the ventral striatum, parts of the prefrontal cortex, and other areas to rationalize him. The operation would have removed his son's emotions, as required when a child's brain developed enough for the surgery, legally set at the age of 13 for everyone. They would have turned his son into a monster, like everyone else. Fortunately, Bruce was able to change the hospital rotation. He got the assignment, forged the necessary records, faked the surgery with his gamma knife, and tattooed A for adult on Jeremy's cheek. The only witnesses were the robotic assistants, and they weren't talking. If another doctor had done the surgery, his son would have joined the joyless masses. Except Jeremy knew too much. Could Bruce have called Angela and her deadly scarlet laser on his own son? Angela had taken care of a number of problems over the years, but despite his training, Bruce's hands trembled at the thought of calling the assassin. "Did you bring a puppy here?" asked Arnold, one of the parents. Jeremy had whispered too loudly. "Yeah, I have something planned for it. Something nasty." "Isn't that counterproductive?" Arnold persisted, his face impassive but his eyes lively. "A puppy brings out deep-seated emotions, the last thing we want." He'd better be careful about his eyes in public, Bruce thought. "You're right, but there's a certain exercise we'll be doing with it." The CPR class Bruce was supposedly teaching was a cover for meetings of the Immortal Underground, adults with emotions and their children. They used a fake waiting list to make sure only immortal families attended. Several dozen of them met every Saturday in the spotlessly clean high school cafeteria from 9 in the morning till noon. The bland stench of the NutriCubes filled the air. Other than the children's laughter and the conversation of the adults, there was no sound. Playing music was too risky, as someone might hear it from outside. Bruce sat at a table in the front with the other parents, occasionally enjoying the gossip. The first 2.5 hours were for emotional control drills. While it was a good refresher practice for the adults, it was primarily for the children. Someday they too would have to fake being rationalized. The last half hour was for fun and games. It was the only time outside the privacy of their homes that any of the immortal underground could just let go, enjoy themselves, and really feel alive. It wasn't rational and it wasn't legal, but it was fun. Of course, even rationals weren't completely unemotional, despite their claims. The brain is a complex organ, and the operation wasn't perfect. It supposedly left you feeling emotionless, and left you a hint of sarcasm. Or was that just an immortal's reaction of pure logic? Bruce had a surprise plan for the end of today's session. He put the puppy in a box, in a closet so nobody would hear it. Now he retrieved the box and put it on the floor. The children gathered around. They all wore the standard clean black pants and shirts, with hair cropped short like everyone else in society. Those 13 and over had the red A branded on their right cheek, falsely marking them as rationalized adults. "What type is it?" Jeremy asked. "It's a Labrador Retriever," Bruce said. The brown puppy looked about with his bright almond eyes. "Let me hold it," Laura said, grabbing it as she oozed in awe. Bruce frowned inwardly at her lack of emotional control. She'd argued that she could turn it on and off when needed, but too much emotion in private could lead to bad habits in public. She'd be 13 in 6 months. She was simply too emotional, and Bruce worried that one day she'd let her guard slip. The surprise he had in store for the group would be a good test for her. One of the younger children suggested the puppy needed to be rationalized, and Laura was faking it. "Scalpel," she said, holding her hand out. "Scalpel," Jeremy said, handing her a pencil. Bruce watched as they finished the operation, but the operation apparently didn't take. The puppy began whimpering. "I think he's hungry," Laura said. "He can have my NutriCubes," Jeremy said. "Please." He took a jump of lemonade. "From now on, I live on lemonade." "He's in a modal," Laura said as the puppy continued to whimper. "Call the police." Jeremy made the siren sounds as the young children laughed. It was time. "Let me see the puppy for a minute," Bruce said. He picked it up. The puppy stopped whimpering and looked at him with big eyes beneath floppy ears. He picked up one of the 2 cloth sacks he brought, the empty one, and placed the puppy inside. He put it back on the ground under the table, behind the box, out of sight of the children. He could see the puppy wiggling about inside. He'd spent the night before practicing, putting a stone surrounded by a bundle of clothing in the sack and slamming it against the floor, pretending it was the puppy. He'd imagined the puppy's high-pitched yelps coming to a sudden halt and the sound of the skull getting crushed. He didn't want to do it, but the lesson needed to be taught. He turned to face the group. "Did you all like the puppy?" As a group, they said, "Yes." "I'm sorry to hear that," he said. He grabbed the bulging sock and held it in the air over his head for a moment. Then, with a sudden motion, he slammed it like a whip against the concrete floor. One of the youngest let out a shriek, began crying. They were years away from age 13, but obviously needed a lot more training. He examined Jeremy's and Laura's face. Jeremy's was emotionless. He was a good student. Laura's was almost too impassive. It was a subtle thing, but Bruce could tell the difference between non-emotion and forced non-emotion. She'd need extra practice. Then the puppy began whimpering from the sack that still lay on the floor under the table, and the group listened to confusion. He'd switched the sacks. Bruce picked up the original sack and poured out the puppy, which ambled towards the children. "Some of you didn't handle that very well," Bruce said. "You gotta be able to deal with that type of situation. It can happen at any time. If any of you let your guard down like that in public, you risk not only just yourself, but all of us. Your families, friends, our entire community. Remember the training." "That was a horrible way you tricked us," Laura exclaimed, even though her face slowly turned to stone. "Good drill," Jeremy said. Several other parents voiced their agreement. There was a few minutes left, so he let the children return to their games, though they seemed in a bit more somber than before. He felt guilty about ruining their fun. Perhaps next time he'd spring such surprises during the regular training sessions. And yet, it was during the playtime that they were most vulnerable, and that's when he found out who needed extra training. "Time to go," Bruce finally said to the group. "But we were having fun," Jeremy said. He and Laura were playing laugh and lose. "Sorry," Bruce said. "Okay, everyone, you know the drill." "Yes, we know," said Laura, with classic 13-year-old sarcasm. And bitter feelings. Think cold thoughts. Exactly what she should have done when he killed the puppy, he thought. "Be a dweeb," Jeremy added. Laura laughed. When everyone's face was sufficiently carved in granite, they re-entered the world of the rational. It was noon on a sunny spring day. Cars zipped back and forth on the street in front. no doubt going about their logical activities. Jeremy and Laura marched in lockstep towards the parking lot across the street, with Bruce a few feet behind carrying the sack of clothing and the box of the puppy. He liked the puppy and wanted to keep it as a pet, but knew that would be impossible to explain. Dogs were functional beings, and this puppy would someday be used for search and rescue missions. He needed to return it to the puppy farm before it was missed. The puppy suddenly jumped against the side of the box, and Bruce almost dropped the box as it fell over sideways, the top open. Before he could react, the puppy jumped free. It fell to the ground, yelping as it hit the ground. It ran towards the street. "I'll get him," Laura said as she ran after it. The puppy ran into the street, closely followed by Laura, intent on the puppy. Bruce saw the red pickup truck gliding down the street. The world seemed to slow down as the floating truck bore down on her. He opened his mouth to cry out as horror engulfed him. Then his well-honed conditioned response to emotion kicked in, and he reflexively froze, mouth open but silent. The truck hopped. Laura turned and saw it just as it crashed into her. Her body fell 10 feet, hitting the ground headfirst with a sick cracking sound. His years of conditioning played out as he silenced the screaming in his mind, the pounding of his heart. He walked slowly towards the street. A crowd formed around Laura's limp body. The puppy ran around Laura's head whimpering. A woman knelt and felt for a pulse. She dropped its limp arm. "I'm a doctor. She's dead. Broke her neck." A very old man nodded. "Silly girl. She was careless. Didn't look both ways. Time of death is 12:04 p.m., the doctor said. "I'll alert the authorities to pick up the body. It'll be easy to clean up. Not much bleeding." Bruce and Jeremy stared at the body, stone-faced on the outside. Bruce kneeled and picked up the blood-spattered puppy, getting blood on his hands and shirt. He put the squirming puppy back into the box. "Are you the father?" the doctor asked. Bruce shook his head. "Her father's not here today." "If you see him," she said, "tell him to notify social services of the population opening. He may qualify for a replacement child. Perhaps he'll do a better job this time teaching basic traffic safety." Bruce silently counted to 10. "I drove the truck that killed the girl," a young man said. "I need her insurance info to cover the damage to the front of the truck. It was an old 2084 floater, so maybe I'll get a new one." Then he peered closely at Jeremy. "Is something wrong with you?" "There's a tear running down his face," the old man said. He stepped closer and tapped the A on Jeremy's cheek. "Yet you're an adult." Bruce fought the urge to wipe his son's tear away. It was too late. Others gathered around, including several of the immortal parents, their faces blank as the others. How could Jeremy let this happen? He was such a good student. Oh, those practice sessions. The doctor pointed at Jeremy. "He's an immortal. We need to hold him and call the police." As if one, the crowd moved towards Jeremy, reaching for him. "Laura!" Jared cried. He yanked his arms free and nearly fought his way to her with a whirlwind of wild punches and kicks. It took Bruce and a dozen bystanders, including Arnold and several other immortal parents, to restrain Jeremy's struggling form until the police arrived, sirens blaring. "Father, help me!" Tears flowed freely down Jeremy's face. Bruce averted his eyes. "You'd thank us later," the doctor told Jeremy. "Except later you'll realize that's an emotional response and not necessary." "Amazing that our ancestors were like that," the old man commented as the police led the handcuffed Jeremy away to be rationalized. "The passion of an animal." "Completely out of control," Arnold said, his dead eyes staring at Bruce. Fighting the urge to wince, Bruce gave a quick nod. Bruce gave the truck driver the contact information for Laura's father so he could get the needed insurance info. Then he watched as the police car with Jeremy drove off. He considered rushing to the hospital, but he knew it was too late to change the hospital rotation and get the assignment. Soon Jeremy would wake up, emotionless and clear thinking. They'd ask how he'd hidden his condition, and he'd do the rational thing and tell them about the immortal underground. They'd learn how Bruce faked operations on immortal family members, how he forced papers to show that deceased doctors did fake operations in case they were caught. They'd all be rationalized. He picked up the box with the struggling puppy, stepped over Laura's body, crossed the street, and got into the privacy of his car. He let the puppy out the box. It fumbled around on his lap. Bruce felt under the seat and found the contraband photo of his son. He stared at it, watching the face turn into a gray smudge as his tears trickled down. The puppy lapped up the salty water, further smearing the photo. Empty your feelings. Think cold thoughts. Do the rational thing. He slouched down in his seat. The puppy found it could now reach his head by propping itself up against his chest. It licked his face. He put the puppy back in the box and put it aside. It took 3 tries for his trembling hands to punch in Angela's number on his personal phone. So that was Rationalized by Larry Hodges. Very dark. So basically, we have a story where this is about 100 years in the future almost. And it seems like society got to the point where they've realized that emotions aren't necessary. And so you hit the age of 13, you are medically removed of all your emotions. An emotion is seen as unnecessary, it's illegal, fun is illegal, enjoying natural things like piercing the lemons aren't natural, so I'm guessing the fact that even question if lemon trees ever existed says a lot about the natural state, probably even the environmental state of their society. All their food is NutriCubes and was it water or some drink? That's like eating like protein bars and water for the rest of your life, forever. Sustenance, not food. It's crazy to think. One of the things I think that stood out to me reading this was Laugh and Lose. It was the game that Laura and Jeremy, the 2 kids, were playing. And I think the reason why is of course it's interesting for the story because it's a game where you're, playing an emotion. You lose if you laugh, which, for their society is literally how it works. But it reminds me of what we have now with try not to laugh challenges. They've been around for a while now, and I definitely watch them pretty often myself. And I remember there was a time I did think as I was watching them, I was like, are try not to laugh challenges training us to be desensitized to humor and laughing? Like we're literally forcing ourselves to not laugh for the sake of winning this challenge with no point. And that's kind of what this reminds me of with Laugh and Lose, which is like, I'm assuming they're doing things to make each other laugh and they're not supposed to. I think that's a very interesting, tie into the real world. I'm not sure when this was written. But I could definitely see how our society could get there. I would hope not that our society would get to that point where we're doing stuff like this. This is like deep dystopia, But 100 years is a long time, especially as Cuban civilization has exponentially increased over the past 1 century. Think of where we were 100 years ago compared to where we are now. Me even sitting here recording this now, it's a dream. They couldn't even dream that 100 years ago, So think 100 years from now what could happen. But in a lot of ways, I don't think something like this could happen to us, where we're medically requiring people at that age to do stuff like that. So I don't know. In a way, maybe. Because there's a lot of things now that we do that are age restricted, whether for the good or for the bad, but age restricted, and you'll get in a lot of trouble if you break that rule. Maybe not to the point where they're literally putting you under the knife and you're pretending to surgeries and you're meeting secret just to laugh and show emotion. I think that's pretty dark. Hopefully, we never get to that point. I don't think I could live in a society like that. As much as people call me a little robot, and I'm usually pretty blank faced most of the time, pretty stoic faced. Just unless I'm doing something that like interacting with other people and stuff like that. Just typically going about my day straight face, but it's different to use your emotions when you need them versus having them just taken from you, to where not only do you not have a choice about using them because they're not there, but if somehow you break through or you pretend to, or a single tear drops, they shuffle you away to rip it out of you. I think that's really crazy. But I like this concept. The ending sucks though. The ending sucks. I mean, it was already getting dark when he was like, yeah, I have this puppy. We're going to teach a lesson today. We stole this puppy so we can teach them this lesson. I'm whacking it around. This whole thing. I was like, oh man, I hope not. And he didn't. But even just the idea of like, I'm potentially going to kill this puppy in front of these kids to test if they can stay straight faced or not is wild. But then the turn later when he was like, yeah, you need to work on this because stuff happens all the time. And then right after, not only did she run into traffic, but he couldn't do anything to stop her because he was so ingrained, so trained to not show emotion that he physically couldn't put sound out to say anything to stop her. Yelling out like that probably alone would have got him thrown out, under the knife. But then for it to happen and everyone's just coming up there and it's like, oh yeah, she's dead. There's the time. Hey, maybe I'll get a new truck if I get her insurance. Whatever. She's just like here in the street. And then his son to show this emotion and get carted away. And him realizing that, for one, he can't even react. Like, his son isn't even taken away. He can't even react to it. His son is pleading with him. He can't do anything. And then to realize that they have this son and they don't even have to try to force a confession out. It's just like, no, as soon as you get there, I can't change it. It's too late to change anything, so we can fake it. Once you get there, you are getting stripped of your emotions. It's a fact. And because it's factual, it's rational, when they ask, you're going to tell them everything. So what do we have to do? I have to sit here and call this assassin to take you out, my own son, for the safety of self, for the safety of the community of people who don't want to be stripped of their humanity, their emotions. Like, that's pretty crazy. I couldn't imagine. Could not imagine living in a world like that. Hopefully we never get to that point. Let me know what you think about this. You think you could survive if someone, you lived in this society and they stripped your emotions from you? You think you could do it? Do you think that it's possible for us to ever get to that point? No. Something to ponder on. That's all I have for you now. Thanks again for coming, listening with me, and I will see you all next time.